Rachael worked for a reputable travel agency that organised corporate and private VIP tours for affluent and demanding clients. According to her employment record, she was an outbound travel agent. However, in practice, she was a jack of all trades. One day she was engaged in sales or worked with clients. The next day she turned into a marketer or created authors' tours to remote corners of the world. And in the evening, she could become a cleaning lady. Why? The office needed cleaning, and the extra income always came in handy. In general, Rachael worked like a bee after the spring awakening, and she accumulated a number of stories about rich clients. For instance, one couple, planning their honeymoon, expressed a fear of sleeping on used mattresses. This led Rachael to personally contact every hotel they planned to visit and arrange for the delivery of new mattresses from a specific company, costing the tourists several $1,000s per mattress. Some people paid for tickets not only for themselves but also for their entire entourage, including nannies, cleaners and a driver. And one man decided that renting a yacht on vacation would not be respectable. It would be more solid to buy one. It wasn't a huge yacht, but still, it was his first yacht purchase. Rachael, who had arranged the deal, even joked that she bought a yacht in the morning and in the evening she cleaned the floors in the office and went to her tiny apartment to cook store-bought dumplings for dinner. It was indeed a day of contrasts. There were some unpleasant incidents involving inappropriate behaviour, substances, nudity and debauchery. However, Rachael preferred not to dwell on these memories. These issues were often resolved with large sums of money. Rachael lived in a very different world. Her life consisted of paying utility bills, standing in supermarket queues, and enjoying a discounted chocolate bar. Although she earned a decent salary, she couldn't throw money around. She had dreams of owning an apartment, so she saved her money. For now, she lived in a rented single-room apartment. Recently, Rachael had been considering getting a driver's license and buying a car to increase her mobility. Besides, she tried to help her mother and grandmother, who stayed in her hometown. The young girl was accustomed to achieving everything on her own. She secured a budget place at a college in the city and moved there from a provincial town in the region. She worked and studied diligently, often harming her health and social life. Rachael, without connections but with persistence, landed a job at a reputable travel firm. Therefore, she never relied on gifts or fate, for example, a fabulously rich fiancé, and of course, she never believed in Cinderella-like fairy tales. After all, she was raised by two women who also never relied on men. However, the universe had different plans for Rachael. On a rainy Monday, her life took an abrupt turn. Many years later, she would recall the phrase, "The rich have their quirks." It all began when Rachael overslept, not hearing her alarm clock. Perhaps she did, but chose to silence the shrill sound and resume her peaceful slumber. Luckily for the girl, her neighbour on the side, who constantly slammed the door as if he hoped to blow it off its hinges, did not change his tradition. As he left for work, the door's slamming bolted Rachael awake. Disoriented, she sought her surroundings, a gut feeling telling her something was off. Upon finding her smartphone under the pillow, she was taken aback. Instantly, wide awake, she sprang from her bed. For the next 10 minutes, Rachael darted around her apartment, attempting to dress, eat breakfast, wash, and apply mascara simultaneously. "Damn it," Rachael grumbled, pulling on her tights. "Why don't I have the features of the Indian god Shiva? Multiple arms. I could use a couple of spare limbs this morning." Rachael hailed a cab, realizing she wouldn't make the bus. However, as they neared her office, the driver surprised her with some news. "I can't go any further. The road ahead is under repair and there's no place to turn around. We'll have to detour, which is quite far." "What?" Rachael exclaimed, straining her mind to gauge the distance she would have to cover in heels to reach her office. To make matters worse, it began to rain heavily, and Rachael had no umbrella. "But I ordered the cab to a specific location," she protested. "Call customer service," the gruff driver retorted. "Get out, or do you want to come back with me?" Rachael realised she had no time for an argument. Vowing to leave a negative review for the uncooperative driver, she stepped out into the rain. It carefully took the girl into its wet embrace, decorating to its taste. Her mascara, unable to withstand the rain, began to run down her cheeks, and her bright red hair coiled into unruly wet curls. Her white blouse was instantly drenched. Rachael attempted to dodge the puddles, performing impressive ballet-like leaps, but to no avail. As she approached the crosswalk, a white Lexus sped by, splashing her generously with water from a puddle. Rachael, a demure and sweet girl who blushed at movie bed scenes and was unaware of crude jokes, reached the end of her patience. And it was as if her skinny body was possessed by the foreman Ryan from her native town, who knew all the swear words in the world for every letter of the alphabet. The girl took a deep breath and blurted out, "You're an uncouth, arrogant drunk. Did you buy a license, a car, but forgot to buy manners? Didn't you? I hope you encounter red traffic lights everywhere, you creep. I hope you trip and faceplant in that damn puddle." Rachael added a few more profanities to her tirade. However, she was taken aback when the car stopped a few steps away from her, just before the crosswalk, and then began to reverse. The back window of the foreign car was slightly open, so her words had easily reached the driver. But it was not the driver she needed to worry about. The window slid down smoothly, and a handsome man glanced at her from the plush interior. "It's been a long time since anyone's spoken to me like that," he confessed, a charming smile playing on his lips. His teeth were straight and white, his skin was dark, his hair thick and dark, and his eyes were brown, like a strong brew. Perhaps on another day Rachael might have swooned over such a handsome man's attention, like ice cream melting in the sun. But here's the problem. Her teeth were chattering from the cold, her shoes were squelching, her hair was dripping, and all of this was not conducive to flirting. "What a waste," Rachael muttered, still angry. "Apologies for my driver's actions," the man said, smiling. "If you're not planning on making a voodoo doll of me and sticking needles in it, maybe I can make it up to you?" Rachael, who had been preparing for a confrontation and had even defiantly puffed out her chest, was slightly taken aback. "No, thank you," she mumbled. "Just drive carefully, please." She attempted to walk around the car, but the passenger signalled to the driver and the vehicle pulled up alongside Rachael again. The cabin door opened invitingly. "I insist. I feel awful," the man complained. "Get in. I'll take you where you need to go. I'll also cover the cost of your ruined clothes. Pick any store and we'll get you something new. And my driver will take care of the dry cleaning." Rachel's eyebrow twitched nervously as she thought, "I get in the car and by morning my photo will be in the crime reports, like body found in the forest belt. Anyone missing? Why is he planning to undress and dress me up? No, thank you." Brushing the stray red strands from her forehead and upturning her nose, Rachael said, "There's a fine line between persistence and harassment. So please, go on with your business and leave me alone." She finally managed to cross the road, muttering irritably something to herself. Rachael was not usually mean, but this morning she wanted very much to vent her frustration on someone, so this deep pocket happened to come in handy. Soon Rachael arrived at the office. She rushed in, glanced at the clock and slumped into her chair. "Got it in time," she exclaimed, dropping the bag beside her. A couple of Rachel's colleagues looked at her sympathetically, while Rachael eyed them enviously. They were perfectly dressed and had flawless makeup, ready for a catwalk. "When do you all have the time to put on makeup and look so perfect?" asked Rachael, feeling like a witch who had crashed into a swamp while flying on a broom. The girls glanced at each other, giggling. They sometimes treated Rachael with a hint of arrogance and condescension. Their behaviour wasn't malicious, but they seemed to believe that a girl from a small town couldn't match up to the city dwellers. "It's simple. I might wake up at 3 or 5 in the morning, but I'll never leave the house without makeup and styling," Diane explained as she peered into a pocket mirror, touching up her lipstick. "We have respectable guests, after all. Of course, there aren't many bachelors, but I still hope to land a golden ticket." "That's exactly what I mean," Sasha sighed dreamily, propping her cheek on her fist. "I decided to work here specifically to find a decent groom. Given our wealthy clients, who would have thought they'd only travel abroad with their mistresses or wives?" "You could be someone's mistress?" Diane suggested. Rachael thought Sasha would take offence at such a suggestion, but to her surprise, Sasha smiled coquettishly. "Do you think so?" Sasha beamed. "There's one I like. He is the jewellery shop owner. He always flirts with me. I think I'll be more compliant with him next time." Rachael, who was trying to wipe mascara traces from her skin with a tissue, coughed. "He's about 50 years old." 62, Sasha corrected her colleague, shrugging her shoulders. "So what?" Afterwards, the girls began discussing how and where to find a wealthy groom. Rachael did not join in the conversation. During the planning meeting, the girls were informed that an important client was expected to arrive at the office momentarily. The man was planning a trip for his work team. When he walked in, Rachael gasped audibly and hid under her desk in reflex, recognizing him as the man from the Lexus. "Here, Mr. Liesel," the boss greeted warmly. "Our top employees will handle your tour. We'll assign an agent for you in a separate office. We have Sasha, Diane, and, Rachael." Rachael realized she couldn't hide forever. Forcing a smile, she peeked out from under her desk, carefully avoiding the guest's gaze. "Yes, sorry, I dropped a pen," she mumbled. Surprised by the behaviour of his most responsible employee, the boss mumbled something before resuming his conversation with Mr. Lisley in a deliberately kind tone. Rachael kept her gaze fixed on the screen, hoping the ground beneath her would swallow her whole, transporting her far away from this place. When Rachael dared to glance at their new client, she noticed his gaze fixed on her now flushed face. A thoughtful smile played upon the man's lips. "I understand," Mr. Lisley interrupted. "Can I have some privacy with any woman here?" Unable to resist, Rachael scoffed to herself, as if he's choosing an escort. Yes, all of my employees are capable professionals and would be happy to," the boss replied nervously, but Adrian Leslie cut him off, pointing at Rachael. "Rachael would be perfect," he said. Rachael could feel the disappointment of her colleagues. It was no surprise. The man was dark-haired, mature, wealthy and handsome. Adrian Leslie stood out among the other guests at the agency, attracting much attention. "I'm busy at the moment," Rachael hesitated. "I need to plan a tour for—" Her boss coughed and looked at her in a way that promised a forfeiture of her bonus and maybe even termination. Reluctantly, Rachael walked down the corridor with the man, feeling as though she were on a scaffold. Once they were alone, she looked into Adrian's eyes. "Listen, I don't want this morning's incident to impact my work. I value my position and will organise your trip in the best possible way. However, let's leave the unusual encounter in the past." She looked hopefully at the man, realising that not all wealthy individuals had a good temper. What if he took offence and decided to fire her, or ridicule her? He might even make outrageous demands, like requesting a trip to India on elephants. Meanwhile, Adrian shook his head, giving the girl another charming smile. "I can't promise you that, unfortunately." Rachael pressed her lips together and glared at him. "Don't act like a child. I got angry, but it's your fault too. Look at me." She stomped her foot, pointing at the stains on her pantyhose. Adrian sat down in the chair, and following her demand, looked intently at the red-haired girl. I'm looking." "I can't look away," he confessed unexpectedly. "And you misunderstood me, Rachel. I'm not intending any harm. I just don't want to forget our first meeting. It touched my heart deeply. Maybe it's love at first sight. If I erase this moment from my memory, what will I tell my grandchildren?" "What grandchildren?" mumbled Rachel, embarrassed by such a confession. "Our grandchildren." Adrian smiled even wider, though it seemed impossible to Rachel. This time, even her ears and neck turned red. Deciding to steer the conversation in a less dangerous direction, she went to work. Adrian turned out to be a pleasant client. They quickly settled many aspects of the matter. Then he asked her out on a date. "I don't date company clients, it's unethical," said Rachel. Adrian sighed dejectedly. "Then we'll have to cancel our deal. I'll go tell your management." Was it blackmailing? Undoubtedly. Did Rachel believe in that? Regrettably, yes. However, after spending a couple of hours alone, Adrian seemed entirely different than she had originally pictured him. He was witty, courteous, and captivating. Rachel felt flattered by his attention. Of course, being a strikingly beautiful girl, she was always in the centre of male attention. Adrian, however, stood out from all the other suitors who had expressed interest in Rachel. Therefore, when he turned to go to her boss, Rachel impulsively declared, "Don't say anything to him. I agree." As Adrian turned around, Rachel thought he looked particularly handsome. From that moment, they began their romantic relationship. Adrian was the hereditary owner of a big company. However, his family was open-minded and did not mind that Adrian's chosen partner was of a lower social status. Adrian treated Rachel like a princess, creating a fairy tale-like experience for her. They enjoyed helicopter rides over the city at night, private dinners on rooftops, and exclusive bookings at restaurants. There were rose petals scattered on their hotel bed, expensive champagne on ice, and tickets to opera and theatre shows. They could also spend the whole night strolling through the streets of the city, discussing books, movies, sharing favourite recipes, and life stories. They could sit in the last row of a cinema and miss the movie because they were too busy kissing. They could enjoy French fries from a diner, have a picnic in the park, or wait in line at the zoo. Rachel soon recognised the competition she faced. Many girls admired Adrian, attempting to flirt, but he simply didn't notice them. It seemed as though Rachel had captured his attention. Indeed, she had. Adrian couldn't explain why he fell for her. He had been with prettier and more attractive girls, but something about Rachel stirred him. When she scolded his driver, something inside him sparked. Adrian felt like laughing despite the terrible morning he had, arguing with his father. Soaked, her hair darkened by water into an unusual maroon hue, she cursed him like a witch. Her eyes were a bewitching green, a detail Adrian noticed during their second encounter. He also found her attempts to hide amusing, and his spirits lifted. Deciding it was fate, Adrian was determined to pursue the beautiful and daring girl. After all, what were the odds of crossing paths with the same person twice, within an hour, in a vast city? Rachel was different from his initial perception. She exceeded his expectations. 100 times better. He fell in love with her daily, even multiple times a day. He appreciated Rachel's ability to argue and defend her opinions. He enjoyed her humour, as she could laugh at him and herself. He admired her courage and determination. He wouldn't admit it to Rachel, fearing it might offend her, but he relished introducing her to the luxurious side of life. He indulged her, taking her to fancy places, dressing her in the finest clothes, and treating her to exotic dishes. He was always eager to surprise her. Yet Rachel surprised him as well. 2 years into their relationship, Adrian proposed to Rachel. They got married a year later. Adrian insisted that Rachel quit her job at the travel agency. Despite the difficulty, Rachel agreed to take on the role of a rich man's wife. However, her character didn't allow her to merely stay at home or squander her husband's money shopping. Secretly, Rachael helped the household staff that Adrian hired. She cooked alongside the chef, gossiped with the maid, and even helped rearrange the linen or clean the living room. The gardener taught her how to tend to the roses and trees. On one occasion, she baked 2 pies, one for her husband and one for the staff, and they were touched and surprised by her kindness. However, other problems arose. For instance, Adrian was an extremely jealous man. He interpreted every smile from his wife as flirtation. Adrian was a man of contradictions. He insisted that his wife dress in designer clothes that mirrored his status. However, when she attracted attention of other men, he would become agitated. He would throw his jacket over Rachel's shoulders and send her home as if she were Cinderella, and it was midnight. Fitting into high society of the city was difficult for Rachael. She struggled to be accepted, especially by the affluent wives. It was as though they spoke different languages. Occasionally, Adrian expressed his embarrassment over some of Rachel's habits and characteristics. Ironically, these were the traits that he had initially adored in her, but had later grown tired of. Rachael was offended by that. Nevertheless, she was not overly concerned about such attitude. She believed that jealousy signified love. She had no desire to attend social gatherings, struggling to adapt to that society due to her simple nature. However, one incident deeply affected her. One evening, her husband had guests over. They were in the billiard room playing pool, drinking single malt, and laughing loudly. Rachael decided to serve the men appetizers herself. She knocked and entered the room with a tray. The guests were pleasant to her, yet her husband was furious and decided to escort her out. He grabbed her elbow sharply and painfully as they reached the door. "Are you out of your mind?" he exclaimed. "Are we out of maids that you're carrying a tray?" Rachael retorted resentfully, "I just wanted to be hospitable." "My wife doesn't serve food to men, okay?" Adrian growled, retreating to the game room. Later, during dinner with her in-laws, Rachael started offering business advice. Adrian dismissed her input, saying arrogantly that it wasn't a woman's place, and suggested she should discuss dresses in the women's room instead. Adrian's old-fashioned attitudes and his true feelings towards his wife became increasingly apparent. However, he cleverly alternated these moments with apologies, gifts, and declarations of love. Time and again, Rachael forgave him. After another year, their son Eric was born, marking a significant turning point in their lives. Rachael adored her son, lavishing him with love and attention. The challenges of motherhood sometimes overwhelmed her, leading to tears and sleepless nights. Still, she cherished every moment with her boy. Adrian, however, struggled with fatherhood. He disliked the messiness that came with raising a child, especially when it threatened his pristine white leather sofa. Adrian was upset that his wife was paying him less attention. "Are you jealous?" she finally asked one day, looking at her husband with a smirk. She expected him to take it as a joke, but Adrian's tight-lipped expression showed he wasn't amused. She tried to explain that their child needed extra care, but Adrian remained distant. She suggested spending time together and going on dates, engaged him in games with their child, but to no avail. With time, Adrian began to criticize her more often. Instead of compliments and encouragement, he pointed out her flaws. "You have stretch marks on your belly. They look disgusting, like something from a horror movie. You should see a doctor to get them removed. Money isn't an issue, otherwise we won't be able to go to the beach together." He criticized her weight, her bun hairstyle, which she wore because their son liked to pull her hair, and more. He also couldn't bear the sight of the bruises under his wife's eyes. They had appeared after Eric fell ill, and she had to sit by his bedside all night. So little by little, their marital relationship was gradually deteriorating. Adrian was rarely home, using his work as an excuse. On weekends he attended parties and gatherings with friends, but didn't invite Rachael, citing her exhaustion and appearance. Previously, he would invite her on business trips abroad, but now he didn't even consider it. "Are you going to fly with me along with Eric? He'll cry during the flight, and I'm used to the comfort environment," he scoffed. "You don't like the nanny's help, so stay with him until he's 18. Rachael, biting her lip, once again explained her stance to her husband. "I have no objections to a nanny's assistance. I'm just reluctant to leave our young child with a stranger for an extended period. Eric can't even speak yet. He wouldn't be able to express any issues," said the woman. "That's fine. Enjoy your time with him," Adrian retorted dismissively. As a result, Rachael stayed alone in the mansion again and again, feeling like a ghost or a shadow of an alive person. She felt like a bird trapped in a gilded cage. She spent extensive time with her son, while Adrian increasingly distanced himself, finally moving from their shared bedroom to another room. This situation continued for 2 years. Rachael held on to the hope that things would return to the way they once were. After all, she had sincerely loved Adrian at one point. She couldn't believe that their relationship could abruptly end as it had begun. However, her husband spun for his wife completely another fairy tale. Once Adrian came home on Sunday morning, but he wasn't alone. He brought with him a dazzling blonde young woman, similar to those you see on social media. She seemed to be a living embodiment of fashion trends. "Meet Rachael. This is Missy. She will be staying with us for a while. Missy is carrying my child, so she needs to live in comfortable conditions," Adrian announced. Rachael thought she must have misheard him. Perhaps she was asleep, and this was all just a nightmare. "What?" Rachael questioned, her face contorting into a frown. "Is this some sort of joke?" Adrian looked defiantly at Missy, placing his hand on her waist. "No, there are no jokes here. Missy and I met a year and a half ago. You surely didn't think those occasional nights with you were enough to satisfy a man. Naturally, I sought love elsewhere," he stated, grinning at Rachael's shocked expression. "Don't look so surprised, Rachael. All my friends have a mistress in each city. Didn't I mention that even my grandfather had mistresses? My father had one too. He supports her, bought her an apartment, a car. We never discuss it during family gatherings, but my mother knows everything. And like a wise woman, she turns a blind eye. As a smart woman, she understands that men are monogamous. Therefore, you should be smart, Rachael, too." The cheeks of his wife flared up. "Adrian, do you think you're an Arab sheikh?" The woman instantly bristled. "You know, my dear hubby, I have no intention of being the first wife in a harem, so keep your fantasies to yourself. Who do you think you are? How dare you come into the house with her?" "Shut up," Adrian said sharply, his eyes darkening. "This is my house, Rachael. My house. The only thing you have here is dirt under your fingernails. So know your place." Rachael realized it was real. Yeah, maybe Adrian's lost his mind, but she's not going to dig into this mess and find out why her husband decided to humiliate her like this. Not just cheat, but bring a pregnant mistress into their home. All this time, Missy stood timidly behind Adrian, seemingly afraid that the red-haired woman would confront her. However, Rachael didn't care about her rival. In fact, she finally realized that she didn't care about Adrian either. "Good," she responded, her tone suddenly cold, her arms crossed over her chest. "Then we can divorce. I hope you can find time in your busy schedule for it." Missy quickly glanced at her lover, who seemed unhappy with this reaction. However, Adrian retorted, "No, Rachael, I won't give you a divorce. If you were once mine, then you're always mine, okay? If you want to leave, then leave. but my son stays with me." Rachel's mind spun. She couldn't imagine life without Eric. "This makes no sense," she muttered, trying to comprehend Adrian's logic. "You don't want to be with me. You're showing off to this girl, but you won't let me go. Why?" "We don't divorce in our family, and we don't abandon our children," Adrian said. "You know that. Besides, we have a family values fundraiser coming up. Are you suggesting I show up as a divorced man?" "Whoa! Are you scared for your reputation?" Rachel scoffed. "And having a mistress in the house won't tarnish your reputation? Polygamy is illegal in our country, in case you didn't know." Adrian shrugged. "I told you this is temporary. I'll decide where it's best for Missy to live later. But now the doctor says she needs fresh air, and I don't have another country house in the city. I can't really keep her with her parents." Rachel's pulse thundered in her temples. Her heart pounded in her throat, and her hands were slick with sweat. She wondered how she was still standing instead of collapsing from the stress. Defiantly, she said, "Eric and I will leave. You don't even like him." "I just don't like little kids, but he'll grow up," Adrian countered. "For now I can hire a nanny, even a whole team of them. But think about it, Rachel. Who can provide better for him? You, in your backwoods, where I paid for your mother's new apartment and arranged your grandmother's funeral? Or here, with his family? I think the answer is obvious." Rachel's hands clenched. Suddenly, she noticed Missy's gaze. The cunning girl was trembling, playing the victim while huddled against Adrian, but her eyes glittered with mockery. Rachel imagined the consequences if she packed her bags and left out of pride. Adrian most likely would take her son away. Adrian would take away her son, and his mistress would become stepmother to their son. And Rachel's heart told her that she would be the most evil stepmother of all. No, she couldn't abandon Eric. Deciding against any rash actions, the woman took a deep breath. Closing her eyes for a brief moment, when she reopened them, all traces of anger, despair, and resentment were gone. Instead, her emerald eyes held a penetrating emptiness that made Adrian wince. Straightening her shoulders like a true aristocrat, the mistress of the house, she gave the blonde an indifferent look and said, "Well, make yourself at home, Missy." With a dignified turn, Rachel walked away to the room she had long shared with her son. It was there she finally allowed herself to cry, quietly, so as not to awaken Eric, who took a nap after dinner. And thus began a strange new chapter in their lives. Rachel was aware of another woman living in the vast mansion. Its size was such that you could avoid crossing paths with anyone if you so wished. Rachel desired this isolation, but Missy sought the opposite. Of course, Adrian's mistress didn't try to be Rachel's friend, but she was always bothering her. If Rachel was walking with Eric in the garden, Missy would rush there to sunbathe or make a phone call. If Rachel were in the pool, Missy would appear in her swimsuit. And when Rachel had breakfast, Missy would begin drinking coffee. Missy often tried to provoke conflicts with Rachel. However, the lady of the house ignored her, which infuriated Missy. And then 2 months later, something terrible occurred. Everyone noticed Miss's health was deteriorating. A family doctor was called, and soon he noticed signs of intoxication in the pregnant woman and questioned her about her medication and diet. To avoid any unnecessary gossips, Adrian took it upon himself to resolve the issue. He summoned all the servants, from the cook to the maid, to understand what had happened to Missy. Then one of the new maids, pale and blushing, confessed, she stammered, wringing her hands. Speak up, Adrian bellowed, interrogating the suspects like a seasoned investigator. "Mrs. Leslie ordered me to put a dietary supplement in Miss's evening tea," the maid blurted out. She said she drank the same tea when she was pregnant. It helps with sleep. A vial containing the supplement was found in the kitchen. Identical vials were found in Rachel's room. After analysis, it was revealed that the vials contained a toxic solution. In small doses, this poison is harmless, the expert explained. However, it's insidious. Regular consumption leads to damages to the body, in this case, likely the fetus. Adrian immediately brought his wife to his office for an explanation. The woman, seated in a chair, looked at him as if he were a fool. "You've known me for a long time, Adrian. Do you really think I would keep evidence of a crime in my room? Do you think I'm such a stupid woman?" She leaned back in her chair. "I think a jealous woman is capable of foolish and desperate acts," he said. "Or do you want me to believe that Missy drank the poison herself to frame you?" Rachel smiled wide and bright. "I think a jealous woman is capable of foolish and desperate acts," she echoed her husband's words, then added caustically, "But of the two of us, only Missy is jealous of you. I don't care about you now." Adrian's heart clenched. It was strange. He felt something similar to what he had felt before when he had seen Rachel for the first time. Yes, he was aware that he was bored with her. He'd had enough of that gimmick woman, and he was deeply disappointed that he would have to live with only one woman for the rest of his life, especially since she was always babysitting now. But did he feel guilty? No. After all, even a nice new car has a shelf life. A normal man often seeks novelty, unexplored territories. For Adrian, Missy became that new fascination. She appeared at a party, capturing his attention. He held no particular affection for her. Rather, he liked that she was as malleable as clay, letting him shape her as he pleased. Missy listened to his every word like a devout follower. In truth, he was her world. Adrian showered her with gifts, and she thanked him for each one, like a dog grateful for a bone. Rachel never behaved this way. She was too bold, too arrogant, too proud. The news of Missy's pregnancy took Adrian surprised, but he chose to accept it, especially since Missy threatened to announce her condition to the world if he did not support her. Bringing Missy into the house had been a spontaneous idea. Adrian wanted Rachel to feel jealous, to vie for his attention. But her reaction puzzled him. Why did she look at him with such disdain, as if he wasn't her benefactor? He was the one providing her needs. Why was it like this? Had he failed to tame her? Adrian also couldn't understand why he was still attracted to his wife. It was as if their arguments had kindled his feelings. Suddenly the man rose and locked the study door. Rachel tensed, asking, "What are you doing?" Her eyes darted to the window and the man grinned. "The second floor, Rachel. Are you planning to jump?" "I don't know yet," she responded, observing the man's actions. Adrian unbuckled his belt and began to remove his shirt. Rachel's expression tightened. "What are you doing?" she repeated. "I'm here to collect a debt from you. A matrimonial debt. This whole poisoning incident has got me upset. I believe it's your doing and you should be punished." He slapped his belt against his palm. "You're insane," Rachel replied, springing to her feet. She was bewildered. When had Adrian become like this? Or had these traits always been within him, and she had simply been oblivious, only noticing his positive attributes and ignoring the warning signs? "Rachel, have you heard that after a fight, the night is the most intense?" Adrian asked gruffly. "Stay away! You are disgusting to me!" Rachel shouted. Adrian lunged at her, attempting to pin her against the desk. Documents and an expensive fountain pen, Rachel's New Year gift to her husband, flew from the surface. Rachel tried to scream, but Adrian covered her mouth with his hand. He was significantly stronger, and soon the exhausted woman gave in. The ordeal was quickly over. Adrian was satisfied, while Rachel was devastated. "I won't file a police report about your attempt to harm Missy," he said, pulling on his pants. "But you no longer have a place here with Missy. You'll move to your mother's place. Our son stays here. If you dare to utter a word, you'll be jailed for poisoning. And, by the way, before you leave my study, clean everything up." Rachael remained silent. She picked up her torn blouse and covered herself. As soon as Adrian left, she bent down to pick up the handle. Her hand froze as she spotted a familiar surname on a piece of paper lying on the floor. "Flannery," Rachael muttered, feeling like she'd heard it somewhere before. Then it hit her. She realized it wasn't yet time to let go. The next day, Rachael departed, but within a week she had evidence that her husband was involved in illicit activities. Armed with this evidence, she returned to the house, to the very study where her husband humiliated her and almost destroyed her. "Did you miss me?" Adrian snorted upon seeing his wife. "Here are the copies of some very interesting for tax service documents. There's enough here for a few prison terms," she said, tossing a stack of papers onto his desk. "Your father had no idea what you were doing behind his back, did he?" Adrian scanned the papers, turning paler with each page he turned. "Where did all this come from? Are you joking with this? How?" Rachael replied with a modest smile. "You always insisted that women should stick to discussing fashion. I don't care for fashion. I've been paying attention to the so-called wise men. I learned a lot about underhanded and fraudulent deals. The rest was just a matter of time. By the way, thanks for the tip," she said, smirking. "The papers you had me collect that evening, Tom Flannery's name was on them. He was your right hand in your grey schemes of tax evasion, and he used to be our guest. You always mentioned grey schemes and black cash, making the company's trade impossible to trace. Oh, and one more thing. Your safe." She gestured towards the safe next to the cabinet in the study. "The password is your birthday?" "That's really stupid," she smirked. The man pressed his lips nervously. "You shouldn't play this male game, Rachael. I'll get out of it, and you'll end up in jail." "For what?" Rachael asked, surprised. "For poisoning someone's cup, for example," Adrian roared. "Oh, I have something else for you," Rachael said softly, and with a seemingly gentle but extremely cold smile, she pulled out her phone and played a recording. On the video, Miss's voice could be heard. "I had no other choice. I don't care if the baby doesn't survive. The main thing is to become Adrian's wife. I'm tired of being a mistress. His wife irritated me, as did the baby," the woman confessed over the phone to a friend. "I've got a couple of other fascinating videos with the same content. You also appeared in a couple of movies," said Rachael, when the recording was finished. "How? You couldn't. You weren't there," mumbled Adrian, who turned palpably pale. Rachael shrugged with the same angelic smile. She wasn't going to tell him that it was the maids, the cook and the gardener who had become her eyes and ears. They despised Missy, and they truly loved Rachael and decided to support her. Even the poor maid, a young girl, couldn't withstand the guilt and confessed that Missy forced her to lie. She was putting poison in her cup by herself. "What do you want?" Adrian asked. "A son? Money? What?" "Justice," Rachael answered. "All the materials have already been sent to the right place, Adrian, so you can relax now. Everything is decided." Soon, Adrian found himself in prison, unable to buy his way out due to the extensive evidence Rachael had collected. Although his lawyer secured a short sentence, Rachael was indifferent. Missy fled immediately, fearing retaliation, but Rachael had no intention of pursuing her. She filed for divorce, and their marriage was dissolved unilaterally, with half of the man's property going to his wife and son, including a mansion with a reliable team. Rachael moved her mum into this mansion. She and Eric led a wonderful life. Using her ex-husband's money, Rachael opened her own travel agency, not for the wealthy, but for ordinary people. She had learned that the rich have their peculiarities, like demanding new mattresses or having a couple of women under one roof. She decided she didn't want to deal with them anymore.